Hi guys, I'm Bree and I have a really weird story to tell you. Alright, so we're calling these classic horror stories, and by classic I only mean old. This particular story was written in 1925, so I think it falls into that category. But before we get started, I just want to say that I have no formal education in literature. I am by no means an expert. This is just something I wanted to share and talk about as anybody else who happens to enjoy it. Okay, let's just get into it. So this story is called The Human Chair by Edogawa Ranpo. Say that 5 times fast. Edogawa Ranpo. It's supposed to be a joke on Edgar Allan Poe because this author used this pen name because he really loved Poe and Western authors at the time. He was born in 1894 and died in 1965, and The Human Chair was written in 1925. Ranpo gained a worldwide fame for writing erotic and grotesque fiction. So it was really uncommon to write things in that category at this time period, and he was actually a Japanese author, so I'm not sure how that fit in culturally to them at that time period. I'm sure it must have been rather odd. The story starts off with a female author who is very popular, even more successful than her husband, which is unusual for the time period, and she gets tons of fan mail. Just people are always sending in their stories that they've written, people sending her notes of admiration. She doesn't even glance at it most of the time. But one day she gets a manuscript in the mail that really catches her eye by the first thing that she reads. It's a letter to her begging her to read it so that the person can confess to their crimes. And the writer even says, please read all the way to the end so that you can understand how my mind works. And she's instantly drawn to it. She wants to read it. The writer of the letter proceeds to say that he is very ugly. He's just hideous. He's the worst thing you could ever imagine. So he instead decides to learn by trade the ability to create something beautiful. So he starts woodworking and tailoring, I guess. So he's making furniture, he's making chairs, and eventually he gets so good that he's making only luxury chairs, these beautiful, expensive items. But he proceeds to say that he's very lonely and sad because he can't have any friends because he's just so hideous. So he's really pulling on the reader's heartstrings. First, let me explain that I'm ugly beyond description. Please bear this fact in mind, otherwise I fear that if and when you do grant my ultimate request and do see me, you may be shocked and horrified at the sight of my face, after so many months of unsanitary living. However, I implore you to believe me when I state that despite the extreme ugliness of my face, within my heart there has always burned a pure and overwhelming passion. So at first you're feeling like, oh, this poor guy, he's feeling really bad about himself, and so you start off in a really sympathetic light to this writer. Or at least I would say I personally felt for him. So after making really nice chairs for people, he just gets depressed because his chairs are so beautiful and they go to these fancy parties with these beautiful people, but he himself is just so unsightly that he doesn't belong in those same atmospheres. Once back to Earth, I again found myself a miserable creature, a helpless crawling worm. So that's some serious, mental anguish that this character already, shows that he has. Then he gets a big order for this big, fancy, expensive leather chair, and he just puts his all into it. He's skipping meals, he's skipping sleep. All his energy is going into this chair, and he finishes it, and it's perfect. It's the most comfortable thing he's ever made, and he loves it. But then he says he feels like the devil whispers in his ear and he gets an idea. And I'm not going to tell you what that idea is. I'm going to read it to you. I remodeled the chair so that the knees could be placed below the seat, the torso and the head inside the backrest. Seated thus in the cavity, one could remain perfectly concealed. So he takes the chair apart and makes room for himself to fit inside the chair. He also says that he put snacks in the chair, water, and a bag for urine and feces. So he is serious about being in this chair. He then strips down to the waist, for what reason, I don't know, and gets inside the chair. And he waits for the delivery guy to pick up the chair and deliver it to the place it was purchased for. So he's sitting there, and the guy comes and he picks up the chair, and he's like, wow, this chair is so heavy, what's wrong with it? And our narrator thinks, oh no, he's been caught, but of course he's not, because nobody thinks that somebody's inside a chair, and the chair gets delivered to the hotel it was purchased for, and he's inside the chair. His plan is to stay inside the chair, and then at night to sneak out and steal things and then put them back in the chair, and then later he'll sell them all and live off of the money. Here's a really creepy visual for you. Shaped like a large spider, this crab crawls about stealthily and, as soon as it hears footsteps, quickly retreats into an empty shell, from which hiding place, with gruesome hairy front legs partly exposed, it looks furtively about. I was just like this freak monster crab, but instead of a shell, I had a better shield. A chair which would conceal me far more effectively. Gross. That's just gross. It's a gross visual. It's a gross comparison. It's just sleazy. It's just nasty. Then he proceeds to say that he doesn't want to tell her about all the stuff he stole. That's not what he's interested in sharing, though he did steal a lot of stuff. He wants to talk about how it felt when people sat. First, it's just staff members testing out the chair, and then eventually it's actual guests who are sitting on it for longer periods of time. Before I could anticipate what the next development would be, a large, heavy body, like that of a European, fell on my knees and seemed to bounce 2 or 3 times before settling down. With just a thin layer of leather between the seat of his trousers and my knees, I could almost feel the warmth of his body. As for his broad, muscular shoulders, they rested flatly against my chest, while his 2 heavy arms were deposited squarely on mine. I could imagine this individual puffing away at his cigar, for the strong aroma came floating to my nostrils. Just imagine yourself in my queer position, madam, and reflect for a brief moment on this utterly unnatural state of affairs. As for myself, however, I was utterly frightened, petrified, with a cold sweat running down my armpits. So we can assume this first time was a nerve-wracking thing. It wasn't an erotic experience. It was just a strange experience for him. There's a lot of talk about how we can tell which people are which based on the way they smell and the way they feel. Those who were fat felt like large jellyfish, while those who were especially thin made me feel that I was supporting a skeleton. Alright, here comes the creepy women talk, because you guys had to have known it was coming. How could it not be coming? Usually women are classified in 2 large categories, the plain and the beautiful. However, in my dark confined world inside the chair, facial merits or demerits were of secondary importance, being overshadowed by the more meaningful qualities found in the feel of flesh, the sound of voice, and body odor. So we knew this was how it was going to be for him. The lack of sight is very good. It puts him on even playing field with these people, he feels like, and it's working for him. He falls in love with this one woman because she sings to herself when she's sitting alone, and it's very intimate for him, and he's never experienced a relationship like that with a woman. So he just loves her. He loves her more than anything. He decides that he needs to live in the chair. He doesn't need anything else but to live in the chair and to have this relationship with this woman. For those who were as ugly and shunned as myself, it was assuredly wiser to enjoy life inside a chair. Kind of sad, still really creepy. He starts to get physically ill from the position that he's holding himself in all the time, day after day, 8 hours at a time. And when he climbs out of the chair at night to go to the bathroom and steal stuff, he has to crawl on his hands and knees because it hurts so bad. Can you imagine somebody slithering out of the back of your chair and crawling to your bathroom? That's horrifying imagery. It's very scary, very effective. There are more creepy descriptions of women that he has love affairs with. I'll sum them up with this one quote. Some of the women possess the firm bodies of ponies. Others seem to have the slimy bodies of snakes. And still others had bodies composed of nothing but fat, giving them the bounce of a rubber ball. There were also the unusual exceptions who seemed to have bodies made only of sheer muscle, like artistic Greek statues. After a few months, the hotel is sold to new owners, and they are clearing stuff out. They want to change the decor, so they decide they're going to sell the chair, and our narrator thinks, oh, I should get out of the chair and sell all the stuff I stole, and then I can live off that for a while. But then he's thinking, oh, I'll miss this contact with a woman. So he decides he's going to stay in the chair and hopefully he gets purchased to live in a home with a Japanese woman because he was in a hotel, so they're mostly foreign women. So he thinks a Japanese woman is really what he needs to have like the best love experience ever. So he stays inside the chair. After a few days at the store, the chair is bought by a husband for his wife. His wife has a Western-styled study, so the chair fits in really well there. As you can imagine, our narrator is very happy, very creepy. He meets this woman and he's just obsessed with her. He's infatuated. He says none of the other women before compare to her. Within a month, I had come to be with the wife constantly, united with her as one, so to speak. With the exception of the dining and sleeping hours, her soft body was always seated on my knees for the simple reason that she was engaged in a deep thinking task. You have no idea how much I loved this lady. She was the first Japanese woman with whom I had ever come into such close contact, and moreover, she possessed a wonderfully appealing body. Tack that right in there at the end. So he says he's going to be the best chair he can ever be for her. He shifts his legs under her to make her more comfortable. He doesn't breathe too much so she doesn't hear him. And by some crazy thing, it seems to be working. Somehow, possibly by a miracle, or was it just my imagination, this lady now seemed to love my chair deeply, for every time she sat down, she acted like a baby falling into a mother's embrace, or a girl surrendering herself into the arms of her lover. So you gotta remember that this story is in the form of a letter addressed to a female author, and now he's describing he's actually inside her chair. No doubt, madam, by this time you must certainly have guessed who the object of my mad passion is. To put it explicitly, she happens to be none other than yourself, madam. Ever since your husband brought the chair from that furniture store, I have been suffering excruciating pains because of my mad love and longing for you. I am but a worm, a loathsome creature. I have but one request. Could you meet me once, just once? I will ask nothing further of you. I, of course, do not deserve your sympathy, for I have always been nothing but a villain, unworthy even to touch the soles of your feet. But if you will grant me this one request, just out of compassion, my gratitude will be eternal. Last night, I stole out of your residence to write this confession, because even leaving aside the danger, I did not possess the courage to meet you suddenly face to face, without any warning or preparation. While you are reading this letter, I will be roaming around your house with bated breath. If you will agree to my request, please place your handkerchief on the pot of flowers that stand outside your window. At this signal, I will open your front door and enter as a humble visitor. She's sitting in the chair that he is describing while she's reading this letter. The first time I read this, it just completely blew my mind. I did not see it coming. I was completely blindsided. I think because it's a story nested within a story, it's a lot easier for this to kind of sneak up on you. Let me know if you saw it coming, because I'm kind of embarrassed that I did not see it coming the first time. So our female author gets up, gets out of the chair, she's panicked, she's running around from room to room. He said he was in the house, what is she supposed to do? And as she's freaking out, there's a knock at the door, and she kind of goes up to the door and she opens it, and it is a delivery man with another letter, and it's the same handwriting, addressed to her the same way. Forgive my boldness in addressing another message to you. To begin with, I merely happen to be one of your ardent admirers. The manuscript which I submitted to you under separate cover was based on pure imagination and my knowledge that you had recently bought that chair. It is a sample of my own humble attempts at fictional writing. If you would kindly comment on it, I shall know no greater satisfaction. For personal reasons, I submitted my manuscript prior to writing this letter of explanation, and I assume you have already read it. How did you find it? If, madam, you have found it amusing or entertaining in some degree, I shall feel that my literary efforts have not been wasted. Although I purposely refrained from telling you in the manuscript, I intend to give my story the title of The Human Chair. And that's the end. The end is just that he was trying to impress and get the attention of this author, so he wrote this story in a way that was gripping and caught her attention, and it's really smart. It was a very good literary device for him to use to get into her head. Maybe he saw the husband out buying the chair and he got this idea. Maybe he's been watching the house because he's a creepy stalker fan. We don't know, but we know that he probably wasn't in the chair after all. And I know it's bad to say, but that's kind of disappointing. I wanted him to be in the chair, you know, or maybe he was in the chair and he saw her freaking out, and then he had this other letter like planned to wait, go give this to her so she knows it's a joke. And then she opens the chair and there's pea bags and peanut shells, you know? It's not that though. That's not what happened. I don't know if there's any notes about there being a more ambiguous ending, but as far as I know, the ending is just that it was a story to get her attention. However, if you like this story and you want a little bit more oomph, there is a manga that you can read online for free that is a little bit scarier. I'm going to link that in the description below. There is a YouTube short film that it's worth watching. It's not this exactly, but it's worth watching. I'll put that in the description below. And then if you still want more and you liked this story, I suggest listening to a full narration of it, if not reading it yourself. This narration that I will link is very good and engaging, and you will probably enjoy it. The story does a very good job of building up dread and suspense, and this is one of my favorites. I wish the ending was a little bit different, but it's excellent. A very good story, and I hope you guys enjoyed it. See you next time for another weird story.